welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Firstly, a big thank you to everyone that commented, all your lovely comments about reaching the milestone 400 episodes. Only taken about 9 years to get there, which means next year will actually be I think next February will probably be the 10th anniversary of the show. So don't know what number episode that will be, but probably about 400 and something odd. Anyway, so yeah, a big thank you to everybody that commented, and obviously I'll keep entertaining you as long as possible. Possibly get to another 400 episodes, who knows. So we're kicking off the next 100 episodes with what I hope is a first. Certainly I think it's a first for YouTube reviews. I'm looking at the Isle of Raasay Distillery. Now, you're probably wondering what the title picture is all about, and you're thinking, what the hell's going on here? Well, bear with me and it will become clear. Now, the thing was, at the moment I'm kind of gathering together samples to do an episode of the show on new distilleries, or relatively new distilleries, shall we say. And I had spoken to Raasay about maybe getting a sample of their forthcoming core release for that. And well, while I was talking to I had a fairly long conversation with Scott from the distillery, and obviously we talked about the distillery, and he outlined what they were doing, and said, well, yeah, I can send you a sample of our soon-to-be released core range, and I can also send you the components as well. And I'm thinking, oh, thank you very much. Now I know, obviously, this is the sort of thing that very few people will ever get the opportunity to taste. So a really big thank you to Scott and the distillery for indulging me. There are a lot of distilleries that sort of don't want to give away their secrets, and just want to present you with the final product. But no, Raasay are quite happy for me to take a look at everything that goes into the final blend, shall we say, and I think this is going to be really unique. Now, obviously I'm not going to go into too much detail about the distillery because I have a lot of whiskey here in front of me, and they're all cask strength. They're all going to need water, and you'll have to bear with me if I start slurring my words towards the end and fall off the seat, Anyway, so basically the distillery started in 2014, and it's kind of gone down a similar path to a number of other distilleries, new distilleries, they start off with producing a gin to get some revenue rolling, but they always intended to sort of release a malt. And whereas a lot of distilleries tend to sort of go for a style of whiskey that is going to sort of mature relatively early. So we're talking about a long fermentation, sort of 70-80 odd hours to get a lovely sort of fruity base, which is going to sort of give you that kind of opportunity. But this is the interesting thing with Raasay, because they've decided not to do that. I mean, they go on about the fact that they want to do things their way, and they certainly are doing that. They've opted for a fairly short fermentation of about 60 hours. So obviously they're aiming for a sort of a more barley-centric kind of spirit, which is going to take a little bit more time. So it's going to be interesting to see, where that's at, shall we say, and is it ready for drinking, and all that kind of thing, which hopefully I'll obviously come across when I've tasted all the component samples. So like a lot of distilleries, new distilleries, they've opted for not just a straightforward bourbon bottling or bourbon stroke sherry. They've gone for a multiple casks, and this is where the title page comes in, because it's obviously you can see there's 4 casks on there. Actually, they only use 3 different types of cask in the core bottling. The 4th one is just the logo, and I just put it in there because, as you know, I like symmetry and balance, so it looked kind of good. So what they've done is they make 2 types of spirit. They make a peated and an unpeated. The peated is about 48 to 52 parts per million, and they use the 3 different cask types, which I'll obviously introduce when I introduce the lineup. And hopefully, you know, we'll pick up obviously all the characteristics of the individual component and taste the core release at the end of it. So the distillery, as you well know, you probably know, has already released an inaugural bottling. I think that came out last year, which is not the same as the core release. It was a bit of an outlier, I guess. It was American oak and wine cask finish. I think it spent about a year in the wine cask, whereas obviously the core bottling, which is now going to be the one that's released, you know, throughout the time, I guess, is made up, like I said, of the three different cask types. Well, technically six, if you want to be pedantic, because it's peated and unpeated spirit that are all matured in the same three different types of casks. So as we've got an awful lot of samples here, and like I said, they're all going to require water, let's just have a look at the lineup. Okay, so we're going to kick off with the first unpeated. So this is the first of the three unpeated. This is been aged in an ex-Woodfords Reserve rye cask. This particular sample has been matured for 33 months, and like I said, these are all cask strength and somewhere between 59 and 61%. So this is going to be an interesting tasting. Sample number 2 is what they've called a virgin Chinkapin cask. Now this again unpeated and aged for 31 months. Now I hadn't heard of Chinkapin, I hadn't got a clue what that was, but according to the distillery it is a type of American oak. So normally most American oak casks are made from Quercus alba, whereas the Chinkapin oak, which are more expensive, it comes from, I'm going to murder the pronunciation, is Quercus mahulabergi. No, I can't say I'd heard of that either. So they've, interestingly enough, gone down this route. The reason for using this particular cask is that they didn't think it was, what did they say, too aggressive for their spirit, because obviously, you know, brand new oak, going to be sort of like, you know, it's going to really sort of, the spirit's really going to take up the oak character really quickly. The third sample in the unpeated ones is from an ex-Bordeaux red wine cask. Don't know which chateau it comes from, doesn't really matter at the end of the day, I guess. And this has been aged for 34 months, so that should be interesting. Next one, we're now on to the 3 peated samples. So this is the Woodfords Rye Cask Peated sample, aged for 36 months. The next one is obviously the Chinkapin cask. This one's been aged for 33 months. And the last one, obviously, the peated spirit in an ex-Bordeaux red wine cask, aged for 35 months. And finally, the core bottling, which I believe, I think is probably at cask strength, and I think the plan is to release it at roughly around about sort of like 52% ABV, which I think is what the inaugural release was bottled at. So yeah, this is going to be really, really interesting, and let's kick off with the next Woodfords Reserve rye cask then. Darkness is general flood. Right, okay, so let's start with the rye cask. Let's see what that has done to the spirit then, shall we? Aromatic, warm, getting plenty of herbally rye character. It's almost it's got quite a sort of almost chocolatey malt character. There's a little bit of rose petal mar. It's young spirit, obviously, and that's giving it that kind of young spirit character. There's a bit of straw. It's got plenty of barley character. The oak is pretty noticeable, it has to be said. But you know, there's, like I said, there's plenty of soft apricot, sort of fleshy fruit, and like I said, it's very much barley accented. See what it tastes like. oily, malty, again really quite barley, less overt oak character on the palate. There's again that little herbal note and a almost chocolatey, almost stouty sort of dark fruit kind of character just coming through on the finish. Again, youthful, plenty of that sort of rose petal mar kind of character. It's not certainly undrinkable, it's not soft and fruity and voluptuous, it certainly has some real character to it. And yeah, that's interesting, I like that. Let's put a little drop of water with it and see what that does to it. Right, now so that's knocked back the oak quite considerably, and now I'm definitely getting what I'm guessing is the distillery character. It's got a softness to it, but there's an edge to it as well. There's fresh white fruit, the apricot, again plenty of barley, a little bit of citrus. It's got a almost kind of hyacinth sort of floral note happening, a little salt, a little toffee, some vanilla. I mean, that could have been bottled on its own, to be honest with you. I mean, that is absolutely gorgeous, and it's kind of, like I say, it's set out its stall, it's producing a fairly robust but fruity, but not overtly fruity style of spirit. And let's see what pass on now. So again, like the nose, putting a little drop of water with it has knocked back the intensity of the oak character, and again it has an edge to it. It's got a sort of straw-like barley character, but it's got some lovely fruit as well. Again, it's quite oily, it's youthful, it's intense, and yeah, that's really good quality spirit, it has to be said. And when you think about it, I'm quite surprised that this is at this point in its evolution, in actual fact. You know, I would have thought that if you were going for this more barley kind of shorter fermentation kind of start, then you would have a lot more sort of rawness, shall we say, at 3 years of age, which is essentially what this is. But it's actually quite forward. But it has a little bit of rawness. It's like I said, I think it's got a really intriguing balance to it. Okay, so let's move on to the Chinkapin oak cask. Let's see what that's done to the spirit. Right, okay, yep, a lot of oak. That's really heavily accented on the oak. I mean, it's darker, it's spicier. There's tobacco, burnt wood spice, gritty tannins, it has to be said. This is not nice and soft, kind of vanilla-y kind of oak. This is really sort of intense and woody. It's not giving up an awful lot of character and the spirit character, shall we say, and I guess you're going to have to be judicious with the use of this, certainly at cask strength in the blend, because this is a real intensity of character. Again, there's an almost kind of chocolate malt note coming through, and again it's kind of sort of leading me into an almost kind of stouty kind of feel to it, sort of dark fruits. Again, there's the raw spirit, the herbal rose petally kind of character, but again, apart from being very oaky, it seems to be sort of quite approachable at this age. Let's see what it passes like. Oof, that's intense. Really dark, spicy, dark fruit. Oh, the spices are just sort of like, really tingling on my tongue. I mean, yes, the alcohol is kind of like intensifying those spices. Again, young, herbal, Marlite spirit. And again, that sort of like malty, chocolatey, malty, stouty kind of character is kind of coming through. But that's going to add an inordinate amount of spice to the final blend. And I think, like I said, I think you're going to have to be sort of quite judicious with the use of these particular casks, because that is really, really intense. Let's put a little drop of water to see what happens to it. So let's see what the nose is like now. Right, well, that's kind of settled the oak down a little bit. I mean, it's less woody, it's still quite dark, still quite herbal. There's still plenty of that kind of spicy notes, but I'm getting a little bit more of the distillery character, a little bit more of that straw-like barley, that apricot. It's a little bit more vanilla notes now, as opposed to sort of like outright tannic or tannin notes. It's still really spicy, it's still dark. Like I said, I think this is going to have to be used with caution, shall we say. So the pants like that. Again, that's still quite woody. It's a little bit of the distillery character coming through, a little bit of that, like I say, that straw kind of barley. There's some more salt, a little bit more of a coastal note kind of coming in. The vanillins have become sweeter, getting sort of almost kind of like white chocolate. And again, still quite spicy and dark. I mean, that is really intense. That is really impressive. Those casks have really added an inordinate amount of character to the spirit in a relatively short period of time. And like I say, when we come to the final blend, it will be interesting to see, you know, how much influence this particular cask type has had on the final blend. So, yeah, Right, okay, so let's see what the ex-Bordeaux red wine cask does to the spirit then. Intensely winey. It's got raw black red fruits, straw, pepper. The spirit doesn't feel quite so evolved, and I'm guessing that I'm assuming that the Bordeaux casks are barriques, so they're bigger than the other two cask types, because they're not sort of, it kind of hasn't really sort of softened the spirit as much. It's got a real grippy, edgy character. Yes, there's some almost fortified notes, and it's really alcoholic. I mean, yes, you notice the alcohol on the other two bottlings, but this really, you do notice it. And I can see that, you know, if you were, I think the spirit is, like I say, it doesn't feel quite so evolved at 30 odd months as it does in the other two casks, and that's obviously, I'm assuming, because the cask is larger, the interaction between the wood is not quite as quick as the other two cask types, which I'm assuming are probably either Hoggies or American Standard barrels, one of the two. And so, yeah, although the wine character is again really quite dominant, I think sort of, again, judicious use of this type of cask in the final product is really needed. So, see what the pal's like. Again, quite raw, a lot of raw spirit character, some subtle winey notes, sort of red black fruits, again, touch of straw, a little bit of salt, quite masked. I'm getting a sort of almost kind of green peppercorny kind of note, and sort of black pepper as well in the finish. Again, that alcohol is quite intrusive really on the finish, and again, it just backs up my my sort of feeling that it's going to need more time in these casks if you're going to sort of use a great deal of that, or if you're going to do an entire bottling that's spent its entire life in a red wine cask. So yeah, it's raw, shall we say, but not sort of unpleasantly so. Let's put a little drop of water with it and see what effect that has on it. Now, like on the previous bottlings, it does dial the oak character down a tad. It's made the fruit a little bit sweeter. I'm getting an almost kind of syruply coated black and red fruit. It's a touch more sea salt. There's a lovely maltiness there again. So, you know, the distillery character is starting to sort of like push through. Certainly when you put some water with it and dial the oak down. And I'm guessing that this is how the blend is going to eventually be put together. I mean, this is it. I mean, blending is just such an absolute skill. You know, how do you go about putting your blend together? Do you do it all at cask strength, knowing that when you put some water with it and bring it down to the bottling strength, it's going to sort of change quite dramatically. At the end of the day, it's all about the blender sort of, you know, knowing intimately how the distillery spirit reacts to the certain cask and how it reacts at certain ABVs. And you know, I would have thought from, you know, if I was putting together this blend, I would have probably had all the samples brought down to their bottling ABV before putting the blend together, so I kind of knew what the final outcome was going to be like. But yeah, like I said, so the nose is a little more sweeter. There's a little bit more sort of overt wine character. It's still a touch on the raw side, but maybe not quite so raw now. Let's see what the palate's like. Again, like the nose, the red fruits, the winey fruits are kind of a little sweeter now. It's still quite raw, but less raw, less intensely spirity. Again, the distillery character, it's just kind of trying to get through on the finish. I'm picking up that straw-like barley, a little bit of apricot again. So this is it. It certainly seems that the character of the spirit is really going to stand up to sort of like quite a hammering from the oak, and you could argue that maybe a slightly more effete style of spirit, a sort of more delicate, sort of fruity spirit, probably wouldn't quite handle, you know, the intensity of sort of new oak wine cask quite so well. So, you know, so far, really interesting. Right, okay, so let's move on to the first of the three peated samples. So like I said, peated to between about 48 and 52 parts per million. So, you know, good level of peat. Let's see what the nose is like. Lots of sweet, oily, earthy peat. Now, it certainly says Highland peat to me, and I believe that's where the peat or the peated malt probably definitely originates from. It doesn't have that sort of medicinal Islay character, which is good. You certainly just don't want sort of like, you know, a kind of an Islay clone. Bit of salt, there's a little bit of iodine, and again the oak is quite noticeable. It's got that lovely vanilla character. It's subtle, subtle sort of like dark malty notes. There's plenty of barley. There's, you know, again the character of the spirit stood up really well to, you know, relatively heavy peat content. And again, you know, this could be quite happily released on its own, and I would be more than happy to sort of like, you know, if they did that, but obviously they're not going to. But yeah, this is absolutely gorgeous, really lovely spirit, it has to be said, and it all just works really well. Let's see what it has up. dry, smoky, herbal, slightly sweet peat, a little bit of almost heather, vanilla, plenty of oak character, but there's still, like I said, plenty of the distillery character, plenty of apricot, straw-like barley. The finish is a little on the raw side, it has to be said. But the peat lingers really nice. It's got that lovely kind of earthiness to it, that dustiness. That is really quite intense. That's lovely. And like I said, I think that is, you could quite happily bottle that on its own, and that would be a, you know, you peat lovers would love it, you know. Let's see what the nose is like now. It's still a good deal of peat now, you know, like oak character. You put a little drop of water with it, the peat and the oak, you know, they all tend to drop off a little bit in their intensity, but there's still plenty of peat there. A little bit more sweeter vanilla, a little bit rounder, a little bit less raw, obviously. There's a touch of toffee now. Again, I'm still getting the distillery kind of character, the straw-like kind of barley notes, the little bit of apricot. And again, yeah, absolutely. I think this is just a lovely point in its evolution, and I think, you know, it'll be interesting to see if they ever do release a wholly American oak aged version. I think it's probably, I mean, they might do a limited edition, they might do a limited edition of all the other ones, who knows? But certainly they've kind of decided on obviously vatting all of these together for their core bottling. Let's see what that's like. Again, the peat has dropped off a little bit, but there's still plenty of that there. It does leave the spirit character kind of like more sort of front and centre, so it's a little bit raw. There's a little bit of rose petal myrrh again, touch of vanilla kind of coming through. I'm getting less kind of rye kind of notes than I did on the unpeated spirit. So, because the rye kind of notes were quite subtle. And obviously the peat is now sort of like the more dominant note of this, but not to the extent that that's the only thing you can pick up on. Again, it's got a bit of a maltiness. There's that slight sort of chocolatey, malty kind of note there just on the finish. Like I said, you know, apart from it being obviously a bit masked still, I think that's actually cool. Right, moving on to the peated spirit in the Chinkapin oak cask, virgin oak cask. Let's see what the nose is like on this one, shall we? Again, the cask is really intense, it's really in your face. It's dark fruit, it's spices, and that kind of, it's made the peat feel darker, if you like. It's kind of more earthy, it's more gritty, it's more tannic, it's more like it's almost just freshly dug. The virgin oak has also seemed to sort of really brought out the saltiness of the spirit, more so than the other two casks. It's really intense, like I said. It's, again, that sort of like stouty, herbally, kind of chocolatey, malty kind of note comes through, and for such a young spirit, it has, you know, plenty of complexity. It's not one-dimensional. Yes, it's very, very oaky, it's very intense, it's very spicy and dark, but like I said, you know, judicious use of this is going to make your final spirit really quite interesting, I think. See what it passes like. That really does hit you. Spices, alcohol, dark fruit, very much the same as the unpeated spirit in the Chinkapin casks. The cask is very, very dominant. It's very woody, it's really dry, it's tannic, and that's kind of like almost kind of emphasised the tannins in the peat as well. It's got, like I say, it's got some beautiful spices. I mean, it's got a real intensity of character. And like I said, when I was tasting the unpeated version, judicious use of this is definitely going to be needed, because that is really intense. Let's put a little drop of water with that and see what happens. Okay, see what the nose is like now. Sweeter peat notes now, more herbal, more heathery. I mean, it's definitely got that sort of islandy kind of character to it. I mean, you know, you wouldn't mistake this for a Spey or a Highland whiskey, it has to be said. A little bit more vanilla now, just like with the previous sample in the Chinkapin casks. It's a little bit more vanilla now, it's sort of softer, less dark, less intense. So that's right. Again, just like the previous unpeated sample in this cask, less gritty, but still relatively dark. Still more, well, it's more sweeter. There's more vanilla notes. There's a little bit more of the distillery character coming through. A little bit more of that straw-like sort of barley character coming through. Still pretty spicy. Peat is maybe again a little earthier, a little sootier. But again, yeah, that's really intense. Don't think that I would kind of bottle that entirely on its own, because it is really, really woody. But yeah, as part of a blend, I think that's going to add some great character. So let's move on to the ex-Bordeaux red wine cask, peated spirit. Let's see what nose we've done on the scent, shall we? Again, very much like the unpeated sample. It's got that sort of real winey intensity, red black fruits. Reasonable amount of peat. Again, it's kind of slightly more herbally peat now. And again, the cask is not quite, or the spirit is not quite so evolved. It doesn't seem to have had quite the sort of you know, it's rawer like the unpeated sample, and again, I think sort of like judicious use of this is required, shall we say. Anyway, let's see what the palates are. Raw, oily, herbal, intensely alcoholic. I mean, that's, oh, mouth is watering ridiculously. Yeah, it's got that sort of real kind of camphory kind of herbal kind of character. Again, sort of even the peat seems to be sort of quite herbal. The bitter spices on the finish. And rawness to it. I mean, it is a bit of a raw beastie, that one. Even probably more so than the unpeated spirit. The peat just seems to sort of like just kind of add to that kind of like raw intensity. And damn, yeah, that's intense. Let's put a little drop of water with that and see what that has done to it. It's still quite raw, it's still quite herbal, it's almost kind of vegetal, but not in that sort of like horrible vegetal sherry kind of note. There's a vegetation, I guess I would say, character. It's an almost, not quite sulphur, it's that sort of vegetal note that's kind of giving it that kind of feeling. And it just kind of adds to the sort of like the whole rawness and intensity of the wine cask. I mean, this is not soft and fruity and sort of, you know, this is kind of full on sort of I'm sniffing the inside of the barrel kind of character, you know. Let's see what the palate's like. Again, young, raw, herbal, not quite so intensely peated. The wine cask is, or the winey notes are sort of like kind of masking that. Sort of black red fruits, there's a tannin, there's again pepper. Yeah, there's a real spiciness there and a real intensity. I mean, yeah. Right, okay, so moving on to the final bottling. This is the real McCoy. This is the core bottling. This is the end result of the vatting of all of these 6 different samples. So let's see what the nose give us then, shall we? Edgy, grippy, getting the dark spiciness of the Chinkapin cask up first. There's some lovely vanilla. There's the citrus, the white fruit, the barley, the straw-like barley. There's the vanilla from the rye cask, the Woodfords Reserve rye cask. And in the background, there's that little subtle wininess. Yeah, I mean, moderate peat as well. It's not a, although I believe it's a 50-50 split of peated and unpeated. It's got a good deal of peat. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, but it's not the sort of the be all and end all of that of this bottling. I mean, it's just been really well put together. I mean, I don't know who the master blender is at Raasay, apologies for that, but whoever it is has done a bloody good job. Yeah, there's a youthfulness to it. There is that raw rose petal kind of note, but it's not unpleasantly raw. It's kind of, I suppose you could say, it's work in progress. It's just really interesting to see where it's at the moment. A lot of it's going to depend upon, I suppose, what this is going to retail for. I mean, given the relatively recent releases from new distilleries such as like Ardnamurchan and Torveig, they've come in at just under the £50 mark, and I wouldn't be adverse to sort of, if that was the sort of price that this was going to come in at. Yeah, I mean, it's a lovely nose. Like I said, it's not sort of soft and sort of easygoing. There's an intensity there. It's kind of, I suppose, never having been to Raasay, I couldn't tell you what the place was like. But it's an island. It's on the north coast of Scotland. It's going to have north coast of Scotland kind of weather, I suppose. And yeah, I can see that it certainly speaks of its place, shall we say. It's a bit rugged, it's a bit raw, but there's also some polish there as well. There's some class, there's some elegance. Yeah, all told, I'm very impressed. Let's see what it passes like. Kicks off with a little bit more earthy peat, quite spiciness as well. The Chinkapin cask is kind of throwing its weight around, but it's kind of balanced in there. Again, the emphasis is more on the Woodfords Reserve rye cask note, so it's got that sort of soft vanilla, straw-like barley, a little bit of white fruit, but it's got that intense spiciness and just a subtle wininess. Again, like I said, like the nose, there's a little rawness there, a little spiritiness, a little rose petal mar, but it's all kind of just indicative of what it is, I suppose. It has intensity. It's sort of, it's like, it isn't like anything else at the end of the day, which is kind of testament to the distillery, to the blender, and to what the distillery is attempting to try and do. So let's put a little drop of water with it. Apologies, my coordination seems to be off. Wonder why. Yeah, seventh cask strength whiskey on the trot in a short period of time. Anyway, let's see what those gives us now. Oh, now that is, again, now that's kind of moved more into the rye cask territory. I'm getting sweet vanillins. I'm getting less of the Chinkapin spices, but it's still there. and again, the sort of like the wine cask notes have become softer, a little bit more syrup coated. Yes, still got that rawness, still got that intensity, and there's a little bit of grippy tannin. It's just really well put together. Like I said, the blender is certainly, very au fait with all of these samples, and has put together a really first class blend, and I think this is really impressive. And again, considering that this is only about 36 months old, I mean, yes, I think it's by the time it's released, it's going to have a few more months under its belt. And I assume this is the blend that's been put together and it's marrying together in cask at the moment. That's lovely. That really is just different to everything else. And what more can you say about New Distillery? That it's definitely got character. So we'll pass on. Again, more accented towards the Woodfords casks, soft, vanilla-y, nice amount of peat, got that grittiness, that slight spiciness which the Chinkapin cask is bringing. Not quite as raw as you would think, in actual fact. I mean, it's not hugely long. I mean, it's medium length, I guess. A little bit of pepper, a little bit of wininess right on the finish, but again, just a characterful spirit. And at the end of the day, like I said, you can't ask for a lot more than that, can you? Okay, so that's today's episode of the show. Yes, I know it's been a bit of a long one, and I hope you've kind of stuck with it to the end, because it's been a really intriguing journey. Firstly, a big thank you to the Raasay Distillery and to Scott, and for kindly sending me the samples to just have this insight into sort of like, how they've kind of put together their finished product. And like I said, I know you guys are probably never going to get this opportunity. I don't know whether the distillery will ever do a sort of a nice little gift pack kind of thing with all of these in. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, I don't know. But all I can say is, if you buy the sort of finished product, you're getting a real quality whiskey at the end of the day. So yeah, the Woodfords Reserve Rye Unpeated, yes, it's formed the backbone, the foundation of the final spirit. With water, it's cutting it down to probably around about the 50% mark, I guess. I mean, I wasn't particularly scientific about the amount of water I added. It certainly sort of gives the free rein to the character of the spirit, which, and a little bit of vanilla, and really works kind of nicely. The Chinkapin casks, I mean, they really add that spice note, that real intensity. And again, like I said when I tasted them, judicious use, and that's what appears to have happened. And the same with the wine cask. Again, the less evolved, shall we say, of all of the three unpeated casks, and the smallest component in the final blend, I would imagine, judging by what I've just tasted, and just adding that little bit of slight syrupy fruit character, which is obviously what I got once I put a little drop of water with it. And the peated Woodfords Reserve cask, again, like the unpeated, it really needed that just dialing down a little bit, a little drop of water, just to sort of drop off the intensity of the oak, and it just allowed the character of the spirit to just shine through, and it was just absolutely gorgeous. The Chinkapin, again, same as the unpeated spirit, really intense, really spicy, kind of up the kind of almost tannic feel of the peat. And again, in the final blend, it's kind of added that sort of lovely sort of tannic sort of spiciness to it, and all told, again, like I said, really nicely balanced. And the peated red wine, again, like the unpeated, not quite so evolved, and again, judicious use has just kind of like just added that little bit of sort of like winey red fruit. And the core bottling itself, well, you know, I think it's going to be really intriguing to follow this over the years as the spirit gains a little bit more maturity. I think as it is, it's really intriguing. You know, it's certainly something I would enjoy drinking. It's got character, it's got personality, it's got intensity. And, you know, yes, there's a little rawness there, you know, to be fair, but what do you expect from something that's just over 3 years of age? And, yeah, I think this is going to be, the spirit's obviously got, you know, a real long-term, you know, maturation ahead of it, and it's going to mature, you know, for decades. I think, you know, it's certainly got that kind of character, and well, hopefully I'm around, you know, in a few decades' time to sort of, you know, taste the Raasay 21-year-old or whatever. You know, that would be really cool. So I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of the show. It's been an absolute blast, and yeah, I can certainly feel that I've tasted 7 cask strength samples, should we say, well, I think this was a great episode to kick off the next 100. So all I can say is until next week, good dramming and good afternoon.